Hi, this is Professor Reidinger Dotterman. Welcome to the tutorial on moving from your topic area to a paper topic. By the time you are viewing this tutorial, you should have read the assignment for the research paper project. And as you know, it's a scaffolded assignment consisting of a research proposal, an annotated bibliography, and ultimately the research paper itself. That process begins by finding a topic, and that can be a difficult thing to do. When you looked at the assignment sheet, you noticed that there was a description of the elements of the assignment on the front, or the first page, and on the second page, you noticed that there were a list of possible topics. Now, these aren't the only possible topics. If there's something related to our course theme of disability that interests you, I absolutely encourage you to use a topic that's not on that list. But those topic areas, I think it's important to keep in mind, really are topic areas. None of those would be an appropriate topic for the paper itself. So let me talk a little bit about the process of moving from a broader topic area to an appropriate topic for your paper. A topic area is a broad field from which a paper topic is drawn. And in this class, of course, you begin with the very broad category of disability, and then you're breaking it down into more specific categories as you're moving toward an appropriate scope for the assignment. It's really important to realize that this is not a very long paper. I know that 8 to 10 pages probably sounds long, and it may be the longest paper that you have ever had occasion to write so far in your academic career. But if you think about all of the different kinds of documents that are written, and you think about books, for instance, you realize that 8 to 10 pages isn't that long. So when you're thinking about the kind of work you're being asked to do in this paper, we're not looking for a brief overview or something. We're not looking for you to say a little bit about a lot of things. We're looking for you to say a lot about a few things. And that means you're going to have a really specific focus for this paper assignment. A useful strategy for developing a specific focus is the tool called classification. Classification is the process of dividing something into categories or classes. So, as you can see here, I'm going to use an example from the assignment sheet, which listed disability and sexuality. Now, that's a really interesting topic area, and it is a topic area, but one thing that you'll discover should you choose to do something in this field for your research project is there's actually a scholarly journal titled Disability and Sexuality, and it is filled with journal-length articles, many years of them now, on different topics related to disability and sexuality. So if there's that much being written about disability and sexuality, that gives us an indication that that is too broad for the scope of this assignment. You're going to have to look for a more specific focus, a subset of this larger category. So one way you might proceed about doing that is to breaking it down. Here we happen to have two terms. We have sexuality and disability. So I would suggest looking at those two terms and breaking them down into further categories. Like with sexuality, here you have the examples of sex education and sexual identity. You also might think about sexual abuse, sexual gratification, sexual orientation, lots of different possible subsets of sexuality. Similarly, with disability, your first paper, of course, focused on defining what disability is, and you already know how complicated that process can be. You also know that there are lots of different kinds of disabilities. So one way you might approach this is by breaking disability into categories of disability, like intellectual disabilities or physical disabilities or um, mental illness, and then you might break it down further. So let's say you move to physical disabilities, you might talk about spinal cord injuries, or you might talk about paralysis. And when you do that, you're going to move toward two things. You're going to move toward a more specific topic or a more specific area of sexuality to focus on, you're also going to be focusing on a more specific population of disabled people. So let's continue with this exercise. Let's say that we have begun with disabilities and we've narrowed from behavioral or social disabilities to autism, and you know that autism really encompasses a range of levels of functioning and types of diagnoses. So let's say that you want to identify a more specific population within the broader umbrella spectrum of autism. You might choose to focus on Asperger's syndrome or high functioning autism. Not that Asperger's syndrome and high functioning autism are necessarily the same, but these communities often are paired together and share a voice. There are several organizations that are quite well known that are aimed at Asperger's syndrome and high functioning autism because those two particular kinds of diagnoses can share a lot of similarities between them. Similarly, you would break down sexuality. So you could move from sexuality to sexual desire, and from sexual desire, which there are lots of different manifestations of that, you could think about sexual relationships. Once you feel like you have a narrow topic field, then it's time to start crafting your thesis question. Your thesis question is something specific you want to find out about your focused topic area. You may have to do some preliminary research before you're able to figure out what your thesis question will be. In other words, if you are in the early stages of developing your research project, as you all are, you may not really know what kinds of questions you want to ask. So you might have to do some preliminary reading about sexuality and disability, or even some preliminary reading about your more focused populations of high functioning autistics and people with Asperger's syndrome and sexual relationships before you can come up with a question that you're trying to answer. Your thesis question, it's very important that you're comfortable with the fact that this is a process. So your thesis question might change either because your research leads you to ask a different question or because you discover that your question cannot be answered based on the research that is available. Research is a process of discovery. It's a process of elimination. Sometimes what you want to find out is limited by what is available. Either you have a good question, but there's not scholarship available that helps you answer that question, or you have a good question and there is scholarship available, but you don't have access to it. And those are real problems that researchers in academia at all levels come up against all the time. And those are just part of the nature of things. So one thing that I try to urge my students to get comfortable with is a certain ambiguity, a certain possibility that you'll feel like you're moving forward and then you have to pull back, or you may have to go in a different direction, and that's okay. So I'm going to ask this as my thesis question. How do adults with Asperger's syndrome or high functioning autism develop sexual relationships when the process of developing these relationships for everyone requires understanding and responding to nuanced and often confusing emotions, a core impairment of most people with Asperger's syndrome or high functioning autism? As you can see, this is a really specific thesis question. Next week, when we do the unit on library research, we're going to talk about how we might transfer these questions into search terms and begin searching for information related to this in databases. One thing that I want to caution you about is sometimes you can ask a thesis question that's too narrow, and it may turn out that I've done that. I might do some searching and find out that I can't find out information about this particular combination or this particular question. And when that happens, you can also use reverse classification. In other words, if you have made your categories too narrow in shaping your thesis question, then you pull back pull back a classification and you make it a little bit more general. So it's a process that works both ways. What I'd like for you to do in between now and the time that the research assignment, but between the time next week's module begins, I guess is a better way of putting it, is to begin this process of classification and to begin thinking about some potential topics for your paper. It doesn't mean that you have to settle on a topic. It doesn't mean that you only have, that this week is the only time you have to come up with a topic. And if you don't have one, you're doomed. But it is important that you start thinking about possible pairings. And this is the only time in this semester that I'm going to actually advise you to do some Google searching. Get on Google, find out what's out there. Just do a scan to see not in the databases, but just generally what's available, what's in the air related to your topic. We have a nice topic area or topic field of disability in that it's a contemporary topic. It's a topic that engages in a lot of different areas of public life and in current news. So you should be able to find a lot of stuff out there without having skilled research tools like the ones that you'll develop next week. Do a little bit of reading, see what's interesting to you. It's very, very, very important that you develop a research topic that you can get interested in and passionate about for the next 2 months. You're going to be spending a lot of time writing this paper, and that process is so much more enjoyable for you and ultimately for me to read your paper if it is something that you connect with or that you feel interested in. That is the tutorial on moving from topic area to paper topic.